If anyone had told me that Mary would one day become my deepest wound, I would have dismissed it with a smile. Back then, she was not just my friend, she was my sister, my confidant, my other half. Now, as I sit in this quiet apartment, oceans away from Lagos, I find myself retracing every step that led us here. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't arrive like a sudden storm. Sometimes, it comes like a slow, creeping shadow you never notice until the darkness is complete. My name is Jane. I met Mary when we were just little girls, barely 5 years old, at St. Teresa's Primary School in Suralaya. Our first meeting was anything but friendly. She had accidentally spilled her orange drink on my brand new notebook. I slapped her, she slapped me back. What followed was a playground scuffle that earned us a joint punishment, 3 long days of washing the class chalkboard together after school. By the time our palms were blistered and sore, we had somehow grown inseparable. Growing up in Lagos taught us resilience long before we understood what the word meant. Mary was always the bold one, fearless, quick-tongued, able to charm or argue her way out of trouble. I was the cautious observer, always watching, always thinking before I acted. We were different, but together, we made sense. Like opposite halves of a coin, turning through life side by side. As our lives progressed, we built a sisterhood stronger than blood. We studied together, laughed over silly crushes, and made pacts about our futures. One day, we'll both marry good men, have our children at the same time, and live close to each other, Mary would often say. I believed her completely. I trusted her completely. When we both got into the University of Lagos, it felt like destiny had fulfilled our childhood promises. We shared a cramped self-contained room just off campus, cooked noodles on single burners, fetched water with aching arms, and survived on mutual encouragement. Those years were tough, but they were beautiful. We had each other, and for us, that was enough. I remember the night we both got food poisoning from some roadside suya. We took turns vomiting into a plastic bowl, our stomachs twisting in agony, yet somehow still finding reasons to laugh through the pain. If I die tonight, bury me with your red lipstick, she whispered dramatically in the dark, her voice weak but playful. You're not dying, idiot, I had replied, pulling the blanket over her shivering body. I won't survive without you. We were inseparable. When my father passed away during our second year, it was Mary who held me through my grief. She slept on my narrow mattress for weeks, wiping my tears every night. And when she suffered her first real heartbreak, I was there too, feeding her spoonfuls of cold ice cream and words of comfort. Our lives were tightly woven, like threads in the same fabric, moving together through life's joys and sorrows. Even after graduation, when we finally had to live apart for the first time, the bond didn't break. I landed a job with a publishing firm on Victoria Island, while Mary got a position with a real estate company in Ikeja. The distance between us was small, but even if it had been greater, I believed nothing could truly separate us. We remained constant, weekend sleepovers, long phone calls after work, and spontaneous brunches at Lekki cafes. She knew every detail of my life, as I knew hers. Every secret, every hope, every heartbreak, even the circumstances of life and death, we shared them all. And then came Moses. I still remember the first time I introduced Mary to him. It was during one of our weekend get-togethers. Moses had cooked dinner for us, a beautiful spread of jollof rice, pepper chicken, and grilled plantains. I was so proud of him, so proud of us. Mary had smiled brightly throughout dinner, showering him with compliments. Jane, this man is a rare gem. God must have carved him for you directly, she said with her usual warmth. I beamed, holding Moses' hand across the table. I know, I said softly. And somehow, he chose me. She smiled back, but only now, years later, do I recognize the flicker in her eyes that night. It wasn't admiration. It was something else. Something darker. But I didn't see it then. Or maybe I refused to see it. Because in my world, Mary could never hurt me. Not Mary. Never Mary. Moses entered my life like a gentle sunrise, slowly filling every corner of my heart with light. Even now, as I sit here recounting my story, I can still see his smile, warm, patient, and filled with an honesty that seemed rare in our world. We met during my NYSC posting in Abuja. I had been assigned to a publishing house while he was working with a multinational company in the same district. Our paths crossed one rainy afternoon when I was desperately trying to flag down a taxi. My umbrella had flipped inside out, I was soaked, and frustration had begun to swallow me whole. Then, like a scene from a carefully written novel, his car pulled up beside me. "Do you need a ride?" he asked, lowering the window. His voice was calm, his eyes kind. In that moment, I saw no reason to hesitate. There was something disarming about him, something that whispered, safe. That ride led to many more. Coffee dates turned into dinners, casual conversations grew into late-night phone calls, and soon, without even realizing it, I had fallen for him. Completely. Moses was unlike any man I had ever met. He listened, truly listened. He remembered every small detail I shared, from my favorite novels to my dreams of one day starting my own publishing firm. He respected my ambitions, encouraged my growth, and held my hand through every uncertainty. By the time my NYSC ended and I returned to Lagos, Moses followed shortly after. He secured a transfer to his company's Lagos office, and we began building a life together in the vibrant city of Lagos. Mary met him physically about 6 months into our relationship. I had invited her over for dinner one Saturday evening. It was important to me that the two people I loved most met each other. That evening remains vivid in my memory, almost painfully so. Moses had outdone himself, preparing a beautiful meal. Mary arrived, her eyes instantly lighting up as she took in the carefully arranged table. Well, Jane," she teased as she hugged me, "I see you found yourself a man who can cook. God must really favor you." I laughed, feeling a swell of pride. "Yes, he does." Throughout the evening, they talked effortlessly. Mary charmed him with her wit, while Moses impressed her with his intelligence. As I watched them, I felt nothing but joy. My two worlds were blending seamlessly, and I foolishly thought it was the beginning of something beautiful. Moses and I grew stronger with each passing year. He was there for me when my mother was hospitalized. He held me when I cried over work stress. He celebrated my promotions, encouraged my writing, and stood by me with unwavering loyalty. We talked about marriage often. We dreamed aloud, a beautiful wedding in Lagos, children, a home filled with love and laughter. Those were the pictures we painted together. And then, after 4 beautiful years, came the moment I had quietly longed for. It was our usual weekly dinner date. As we sat beneath the soft glow of candlelight in that beautiful restaurant, he reached across the table, holding my hands gently in his. "Jane," he began, his voice steady, "you have brought light into my life in ways I cannot describe. Every moment with you has confirmed what I already know, that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." My heart raced. My breath caught. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed the most beautiful engagement ring I had ever seen. "Will you marry me?" I barely whispered my answer. "Yes." Tears filled my eyes as I stretched my hand forward, and he slipped the ring onto my finger. In that moment, I believed my life was complete. I could almost see the rest of our lives unfolding, the wedding, the children, the endless shared laughter. I called Mary that very night, my voice trembling with excitement. "He proposed, Mary. He proposed." She screamed with joy. "Jane. Oh my God. I'm so happy for you. Finally." Her excitement sounded genuine, and I wanted to believe it was. She asked for every detail, the proposal, the ring, the plans. We spent hours talking that night, dreaming aloud together as we had always done. At least, that's what I thought. I didn't know, sitting there with my heart wide open, that my greatest sorrow had already begun writing itself. Beneath her congratulations, hidden behind her laughter, something far more sinister was already at work. If someone had asked me to list my greatest blessings at that point in my life, Moses and Mary would have topped the list, the man I loved and the sister I never had. My heart was full. My world, I believed, was finally aligning the way I had always dreamed. After the proposal, preparations for the wedding began almost immediately. My mother was overjoyed, my colleagues at work were excited, and Mary was my anchor through it all. She accompanied me to bridal shops, helped me pick out colors, venues, and even sat with me late into the night designing invitation cards. She laughed with me, reassured me when I felt overwhelmed, and always whispered, "Soon, you'll be a bride." I trusted her so deeply that I allowed her to handle several aspects of the planning. She knew everything, my vendors, my guest list, even the private details of my relationship with Moses. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something changed. It began with small things, Moses missing calls, rescheduling appointments, and canceling our dates. At first, I thought little of it. His job was demanding, and occasional schedule changes were understandable. But as the days turned into weeks, his excuses grew more frequent, his voice more distant. "Work is crazy right now, Jane," he would say over the phone, his tone flat. "Just give me a little time." At first, I reassured myself. Every relationship has its seasons. I chose to be patient, convinced that the man who had loved me so tenderly for 4 years could not simply be withdrawing from me without reason. But as the silence lengthened, cracks began to form in my confidence. Messages went unanswered. Weekend plans evaporated. The man who once could not go a single day without hearing my voice was now slipping away like water between my fingers. Confusion gave way to anxiety. Anxiety gave way to fear. One evening, after nearly 3 weeks of barely hearing from him, I called Mary, my voice trembling. "Mary, I don't understand what's happening. He's distant. He barely calls. He doesn't respond like before." She sighed deeply. "Jane, men get cold feet sometimes, especially with weddings approaching. Maybe he's just overwhelmed." "But this isn't like him," I whispered. "This man was ready. He proposed to me." "Have you tried going to his office to see him?" she asked, her voice calm. I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. "I don't want to seem desperate. If he needs space, I want to give it." Mary stayed silent for a moment. "Maybe you're right. Just give him a little time. If it continues, we'll figure it out." I hung on to her words like a drowning woman clutches at driftwood. Weeks turned into months. The wedding date drew closer, yet Moses remained increasingly unavailable. The man who once dreamt aloud about our future together had all but vanished, leaving me suspended in a cruel state of limbo. Then, without warning, it happened. He disappeared completely. No calls. No messages. No explanation. He ghosted me. One day we were planning our lives together, and the next, he was gone, as though our 4 years together had meant nothing. I broke. Quietly at first. My pride wouldn't allow me to scream. I waited, clinging to foolish hope, convincing myself that this nightmare would soon pass. That he would return, explain everything, and everything would be as it was. But he never did. The shame was unbearable. My family whispered cautiously, my friends pitied me, and my mother tried her best to console me. But no one truly understood the depth of my devastation. Except, of course, Mary. She was there as always, wiping my tears, listening to my broken whispers at night, bringing me food I couldn't eat. "You're strong, Jane," she would say. "You'll get through this." And I believed her. Who else did I have? 2 years passed. 2 long, agonizing years of nursing my wound, rebuilding my self-worth, and trying desperately to move forward. Lagos felt different, emptier, heavier. Every corner carried memories of him. Every familiar street felt like an open wound. Eventually, I decided to leave. I needed distance, not just from Moses, but from everything familiar. The weight of betrayal had become too heavy to carry in the city that held so many memories. I accepted a work transfer abroad, packed my life into 2 suitcases, and boarded a flight to begin again. As I watched the lights of Lagos fade beneath me that night, I told myself I was leaving my pain behind. But I was wrong. I was not leaving my pain. My pain was following me. I just didn't know how cruelly it would resurface. Not yet. Time, they say, heals wounds. But whoever said that clearly never carried the kind of wound I did. Time didn't heal me, it merely taught me how to live with the ache, how to smile with broken pieces buried beneath my ribs. For 2 years, I tried to rebuild my life in a foreign land. I drowned myself in work, filled my evenings with empty conversations, and forced myself to find joy in things that once came naturally. Some days were better than others. Some nights were merciless. I still thought of him, of Moses. But eventually, the sharp pain dulled into a silent ache. What haunted me more was not his absence, but the unanswered question that followed me like a shadow: why? Why had he left without a word? Why had he thrown away 4 years of love and promises as though they meant nothing? What had I done that was so unforgivable? I tortured myself with every possibility, but no answer ever came. Mary remained in Lagos. Though distance separated us, we kept in touch sporadically, short messages, occasional calls, polite conversations that danced around the landmines of my past. I never sensed anything different. She was still my friend, or so I thought. Then one evening, as autumn leaves gathered outside my apartment window, I received a message that shattered everything I had spent years trying to rebuild. It came from an old university classmate, Grace. Her message was simple: "Jane, I just thought you should know. Moses and Mary got married last weekend." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I stared at the words. My mind rejected them, rewrote them, twisted them into something less brutal. But the words remained. Moses and Mary married. It felt as though the floor beneath me had collapsed, and I was falling through endless darkness. My first instinct was denial. This had to be a mistake. Mary would have told me. She would never, she couldn't. I dialed her number with trembling fingers. My chest tightened as it rang. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice calm, almost too calm. "Jane," she greeted cheerfully, as though nothing had changed. I forced my voice to remain steady. "Is it true?" There was a long pause. "Is what true?" I swallowed hard. "That you married Moses." Her silence on the other end confirmed everything before she finally spoke, her tone soft. "Jane, I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you." My vision blurred with tears as her words stabbed deeper than any knife. "You didn't want to hurt me. You married the man who abandoned me without explanation, and you didn't want to hurt me. It just happened," she whispered. "We reconnected after you left. One thing led to another. I didn't plan for it, Jane. Love is complicated. Love. Complicated." I wanted to scream, but no words came. Only a bitter silence filled the space between us. My world spun violently, crashing into pieces I couldn't gather fast enough. "You were my sister, Mary," I finally whispered, my voice broken. "You knew everything. You knew how much I loved him. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she repeated, as though rehearsing a weak defense. I ended the call before I lost whatever dignity I had left. My body collapsed onto the cold floor of my apartment, and I wept. Not just for Moses. Not even for the betrayal itself. I wept for the death of something far greater, trust. The sacred bond we had shared since childhood had been trampled and discarded. That night, beneath the weight of my grief, I realized that some wounds never close. Some betrayals are too violent to forgive. Mary hadn't simply married my ex-fiancé. She had stolen something sacred. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. The sister I had grown up with was gone. In her place stood a stranger wearing her face. And yet, even in that moment of unspeakable pain, I never imagined how much darker this story would become. Because what she had done went far deeper than simply marrying Moses. She hadn't just stolen my fiancé. She had poisoned him against me. And I would not discover the full extent of her wickedness until years later. Their wedding was the talk of the moment among familiar circles. Mutual friends shared photos on social media, photos I couldn't bring myself to look at, yet somehow couldn't avoid. There she was, standing beside him in a flowing white gown, smiling radiantly beneath the Lagos sun, while Moses stood proudly at her side, his hands resting gently around her waist. A smile I once knew so intimately now belonged to another, to her. The betrayal cut deeper each time I saw another picture, another congratulatory message, another caption glorifying their fairy tale. But what disturbed me most was the silence. Neither Moses nor Mary reached out to me after that call. No explanations. No apologies. No attempts to mend what was broken. It was as if I had ceased to exist in their world, as if the years I had spent with Moses, the years I had spent with Mary as my sister, had evaporated into nothingness. I stayed far away, oceans away. The pain was still too raw, too consuming. Returning to Lagos was out of the question. I buried myself in my work abroad and tried desperately to forget. But forgetting is not as simple as living. I learned that their wedding had been grand, a well-attended ceremony held at one of the luxury event centers on Victoria Island. Friends described Mary as glowing with happiness, while Moses was the picture of devotion. Some spoke as though their union was a beautiful redemption story, two hearts finding each other after a failed engagement, as if I had been some unfortunate accident in their perfect narrative. I never spoke a word to defend myself. What was there to say? The world had already written its story. I was simply the forgotten ex-fiancée, the woman who had been left behind. 1 year after their wedding, I heard little else. The occasional updates that filtered through mutual friends suggested that their life appeared picture perfect. They bought a home in Lekki Phase 1, went on vacations to Dubai and the Maldives, and attended social events together, always smiling, always shining. But beneath the glossy images, something was festering. I would not fully comprehend it until much later. During that time, I often found myself replaying everything that had happened. I dissected every conversation I had ever had with Mary, searching for signs I had missed. Had there been moments when envy had flickered in her eyes? Times when admiration was tinged with something darker? Was she always waiting for an opportunity to take what was mine? The questions tortured me. I was haunted not only by their betrayal but by my own blindness. I had trusted her with the deepest parts of my life, my dreams, my fears, my love for Moses, and she had weaponized that trust against me. Still, through it all, one thing remained constant: I had no answers. No closure. Until one unexpected afternoon, when an old friend from university, Teresa, reached out to me. We were friends in university, but our friendship wasn't that deep. We also chatted on Facebook once in a while. She had relocated to London with her fiancé, and now, by some twist of fate, she was in the same city as I was, requesting to meet over coffee. I agreed, more out of politeness than curiosity. But what Teresa would reveal that day would unravel everything I thought I knew. As we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, exchanging pleasantries and updates on life abroad, the conversation inevitably shifted to Lagos. Then, without warning, she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Jane," she said softly, "there's something you need to know. I've kept it to myself for too long." I felt my stomach tighten. "What is it?" She exhaled slowly. "Mary lied to Moses about you. She told him things, terrible things, about your past. Things that I am sure are not true." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean?" "She told him that you were promiscuous during our university years. That you lived recklessly and ruined your womb from multiple abortions. She told him you wouldn't be able to bear children." The words struck like lightning. I could barely speak. My heart pounded so violently that I thought it might burst. "She told him you hid it from him," Teresa continued. "That you wanted to trap him into marriage, knowing you could never give him children." Tears welled in my eyes, my vision blurring. "How did you know this?" I asked. "Moses and my fiancé worked in the same company, and they are close. He confided in him." I whispered, "But that's not true." I know," she said quickly, reaching for my hand. "I know it's not true. But Moses believed her. That's why he disappeared. That's why he left." I sat there, trembling, as the weight of her words sank in. It was not fear or hesitation that made Moses abandon me. It was Mary's lies. She had not simply stolen him. She had poisoned him against me, rewriting my story into a twisted fiction that justified her betrayal. And suddenly, like a puzzle snapping into place, everything made sense. The distance. The avoidance. The cold silence. Mary had orchestrated it all. I sat there for what felt like hours after Teresa left, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. My world had collapsed once. Now it was burning. But beneath the ashes, something stirred within me, something cold, deliberate, and sharp. Vengeance. I had tried to heal. I had tried to move forward. But Mary had not only stolen my fiancé, she had assassinated my character, destroyed my reputation, and laughed in the face of my pain. And now, I would make sure she felt every ounce of what she had inflicted on me. Vengeance, I have learned, is not born in a single moment. It grows, slowly, quietly, like a poisonous vine wrapping itself around your soul, tightening with every breath, until nothing else remains but the cold, singular desire to make the one who hurt you bleed as you bled. I did not act immediately. I would not give in to the recklessness of rage. I had spent too long being the wounded one. This time, I would be deliberate. Precise. Patient. I knew Mary well, perhaps better than anyone else ever could. I knew her fears, her weaknesses, her vulnerabilities. And now I possessed the truth, the one thing that could shatter the carefully constructed life she had stolen from me. The lie she told about me was her own reality. I had all the evidence there, backed up in my WhatsApp history. It all happened during our service year. Mary was dating a young married man then. I didn't approve of the relationship, but she said he made her happy. She had gotten pregnant for him, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. When Mary realized she was pregnant, she was almost past the first trimester. She didn't want to keep the baby out of shame and fear of her parents' reaction. They'd disown her if they found out. She had opted to terminate the pregnancy. I was in Abuja and couldn't physically be there for her, but she detailed everything that happened to me in our chats. The termination hadn't gone as planned, and the process damaged her womb. I carefully made a screenshot of all the chats and dates. Every detail, I made sure to capture. I carefully planned my return to Lagos. Not for long. Just long enough. The company I worked for had recently opened a partnership with a firm based on Victoria Island. An opportunity presented itself, a business trip, brief but sufficient for my purpose. When I arrived at Matola Muhammad International Airport, the humid Lagos air hit me like an old memory, familiar, dense, and heavy with unspoken things. I had left this city broken. Now, I returned with steel in my spine. I checked into a hotel on the island, keeping my presence in the city as quiet as possible. The next step was delicate. I needed to get close enough to Moses without alarming him, without alerting Mary. By an interesting stroke of fate, or perhaps divine irony, I discovered that Moses's firm had recently partnered with the very company that had invited us into Lagos. His name appeared on several documents I was required to review. His signature, bold and familiar, stirred something deep within me. This was my window. The first time I saw him again was during a joint meeting at the company's headquarters. He entered the conference room, dressed impeccably in a navy suit, his face more mature but still hauntingly familiar. For a moment, our eyes met. He froze. I remained composed. "Good morning, everyone," I greeted, my voice steady, professional. "Shall we begin?" The meeting proceeded as though we were strangers. But beneath the polished surface, tension coiled like a spring between us. I could feel his eyes drifting toward me throughout the session, filled with questions, disbelief, and perhaps even shame. When the meeting ended, he approached me hesitantly as the others filtered out. "Jane," he began, his voice barely a whisper. I looked up, meeting his gaze with cool detachment. "Moses." He opened his mouth to speak but struggled to find words. For a man once so certain, he now looked like a man haunted. "It's been a long time," he finally said. "Yes," I replied simply. He looked down, his hands nervously adjusting his cufflinks. "I never thought I would see you again." "Nor did I answered, allowing the silence between us to speak the words we were both too careful to say. There was guilt in his eyes, the kind that cannot be hidden by time or excuses. But I wasn't here for his apologies. Not yet. After a few strained pleasantries, I left him standing there, confused and shaken. The first seed had been planted. Mary would hear of my return soon enough. As I anticipated, it did not take long for the news of my return to reach her. Mary had always prided herself on being connected, on knowing everything before anyone else did. And now, my sudden appearance back in Lagos, walking in close proximity to Moses, would have struck her like an unexpected storm on what she thought was calm waters. The first call came 2 days later. It was late in the evening when my phone rang. The screen displayed her name, Mary. For a brief moment, I simply stared at it, allowing the shrill tone to fill the room like an unwelcome guest. My heart remained calm. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times. Finally, I answered. "Jane." Her voice was tense, but she tried to mask it with forced warmth. "I heard you're in Lagos." "So it seems," I replied coolly. A pause followed. She was searching for the right words, calculating her next move. "Wow, after all these years, you didn't think to reach out," she finally said, attempting to wrap her accusation in a smile. "I had no reason to," I responded softly, my words precise. "You're working with Moses now?" she asked, her voice faltering slightly. "Yes," I said simply. "Purely professional." Her silence on the other end was deafening. I could almost hear the storm raging behind her carefully composed tone. "I see," she finally whispered. "I hope your stay is comfortable." "It has been," I replied. "Quite peaceful, in fact." She ended the call soon after, but I knew that conversation had achieved exactly what I wanted, to unsettle her. To awaken her fear. The cracks had begun to form. Soon after, I made sure Moses and I crossed paths often at work, always professional, always measured, but always leaving him with unspoken questions hanging heavily in the air. He struggled visibly. The guilt in his eyes deepened each time our conversations ended. I knew he was beginning to doubt the narrative Mary had fed him all those years ago. The seed of doubt had been planted. And then came the moment I had long awaited. During one of our brief meetings, Moses requested a private word. "Jane," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "may I ask you something?" I nodded. "Back then, when I left, I was told things about you. About your past. About your health." I remained silent, allowing him to wrestle with his own discomfort. "Were any of those things true?" he finally asked, his eyes searching mine desperately. "What things, and who told you?" I replied. With a slightly trembling voice, he told me exactly what I already heard. He didn't mention the source, but I know who. I held his gaze for a long moment before responding with calm clarity. "No, Moses. None of it was true." He inhaled sharply, his face pale. The weight of his actions, of his blindness, crashed down upon him. I didn't know," he stammered. "She said," he caught himself on time and tried to hold back. "I know what she said," I interrupted softly. "And you chose to believe her without ever asking me." The silence between us was thick with regret. Tears welled up in his eyes, but I remained steady. I had no intention of granting him absolution that easily. He whispered, almost broken, "I'm so sorry." But apologies would not rewrite history. His sorrow belonged to him now. I stood, gathering my files. Some debts, Moses, cannot be paid with words. And with that, I left him to wrestle with his guilt. I knew that once he confronted Mary, and he would, the final act of my carefully crafted vengeance would begin. The days that followed were unsettlingly quiet. The kind of quiet that does not bring peace, but signals a coming storm. I knew Moses. I knew the kind of man he was, proud, responsible, and deeply troubled by guilt once it took root. My revelation had planted a seed that would not allow him rest. He would confront Mary, of that I was certain. Vengeance is never complete until the truth stands naked before all who once danced around it. For years, I had carried the weight of betrayal and humiliation. I had watched from afar as Mary thrived, wearing my pain as her crown. But now, as the final pieces of her carefully orchestrated lies collapsed, I knew the time had come to deliver the last and most devastating blow. The truth she had buried deepest, the one that terrified her more than anything, was about to be unearthed. It was not enough that Moses knew she had lied. It was not enough that her reputation had begun to rot under the weight of her deception. No, Mary needed to face herself, fully and completely. She needed to look into the mirror of her own ruin. I reached out to Moses and requested a meeting. He agreed without hesitation. The man I once loved now stood before me again, older, wearier, his soul heavy with guilt and regret. We met in a private lounge in Victoria Island. The low hum of distant conversations provided the perfect cover for what would be said. He began first, his voice thick with remorse. "Jane, I don't know how to ask for your forgiveness. I was blind. I believed her lies because it was easier than confronting my own fears. I failed you." I studied him for a long moment. The man who had once broken me now sat across from me, stripped of his pride. "You cannot undo the past, Moses," I said gently. "But you deserve to know everything." I opened the folder that had the saved screenshots on my phone and handed it to him. As he read each screenshot, his breath grew heavier with each revelation. He read about the abortion, the complications, the irreversible damage to her womb, the very truth she had projected onto me to save herself. When he finished, he looked up at me, his face pale, his hands trembling. She knew," he whispered. "All this time. And still, she told me you were the one who couldn't have children." I nodded slowly. "She feared that if you knew the truth, you would leave her before she had a chance to secure you. So she created a lie, one so vile, so cruel, and used it to steal what was never meant to be hers. He lowered his head into his hands, overwhelmed. I gave up everything for her. I abandoned you. I destroyed our love because of her lies. Tears welled in his eyes, but I remained composed. My tears had been shed long ago. You were not the only victim, Moses, I said softly. But now you know the full truth. And the rest is yours to carry. The weight of it crushed him visibly. In that moment, I felt no joy, only a cold, solemn satisfaction. The truth had spoken. The following weeks unfolded like an unstoppable avalanche for Mary. Moses filed for divorce quickly and without negotiation. His family, once so fond of her, withdrew their support completely when the truth came to light. Friends abandoned her, ashamed to be associated with the scandal that now consumed her name. Her reputation, once pristine, was reduced to whispers of disgrace. And I watched it all, not with hatred anymore, but with an eerie calm. I did not return to Lagos for much longer after that. My purpose there had been fulfilled. The chapter of my betrayal was closed, not with vengeance dripping in blood, but with the finality of truth, revealed and unchallenged. Before I left, I received one final message from Mary. It was short. A broken attempt at an apology. I never meant for it to go this far. I only wanted to be happy. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it. Happiness built on another's ruin is never true happiness. She had learned that in the hardest way. And I finally reclaimed my peace.